Magnus Carlsen against Parham Maghsoodoo.
Yes, and we have a French defense, advanced French that Carlsen has chosen, and Maghsoodoo is getting the trade of the light squared bishops, which in general is a desirable thing for black to achieve in the French defense, given that bishop is usually quite restricted. Something very strange has happened with black retreating the bishop all the way to f8, where he had just been developed from.
And right now, Magnus is pushing his pawns forward on the left side, trying to chase that black queen. Right now, that queen is pointing down towards the f1 square, which means white is not allowed to castle if the king then has to cross over a square that's being controlled by the opponent. So Magnus is trying to kick the queen away.
Where is he going to move the queen? I think probably c4 is an obvious square. And then Magnus is going to have to figure out how to get rid of that queen in order to be able to castle. So my suggestion is, well, maybe bishop d4 and knight a3, moving that queen over. You want the c3 pawn protected before you attack the queen. You could consider sacking the pawn, but then you'd have to do some calculation. Actually, probably a good idea. Maybe queen c4, knight d2, but okay, Maghsoodoo moved his queen back. He didn't want to face the prospect of his queen getting attacked.
And that has allowed Magnus now to castle his king, get that guy to safety, while black still has not developed the pieces on the king side. So black's king not looking great in terms of getting to safety anytime soon.
Yeah, black is way behind in development. I mean, the whole back rank is just sitting there. And so actually, I really don't like the way this is going for Maghsoodoo. I mean, all that Carlsen is going to need to do is open up some files here in the middle of the board.
And the question is, how is Magnus going to open up so that his rooks can invade? One option pushing forward on the right side, the other one pushing forward in the middle. Magnus chooses not the latter. He doesn't do any of them. Instead, he's playing a restricting move. His pawn forward, taking control of two important squares, which coincidentally are both those squares the Black Knight wanted to use.
Yes, and so Maghsoodoo moved his queen over to c7 to allow the knight to be developed from d7. And yeah, Carlsen, the question for him, how does he get that c4 move in? I'm sure that's what he's thinking about. That's such a desirable move for white to play. It's a backwards pawn anyway, so you'd like to get rid of it, and you'd love to open up the c-file.
And Magnus chooses to move his knight forward, getting ready to push that pawn, like Irina said. Maghsoodoo getting his knight out, getting the pieces into the game.
Yes, and now Magnus surely must be thinking about playing c4, even though it is a pawn sacrifice, then going rook c1. Now Maghsoodoo from his end wants to play his knight to b6 and try to control that square. And Carlsen, I believe, just stopped that with his last move. Oh, he played c4 actually.
Yeah, so Magnus is pushing forward, trying to exploit the fact that Black's king is still stuck in the center. This is a pawn sacrifice of the pawn on c4, but it's also a sacrifice of the pawn in the middle of the board. Magnus using his rook to try and point down towards the Black queen. This looks very dire for the Iranian player.
Yeah, if he goes knight b6, then Carlsen has pawn to a5, chasing away the knight. And instead of that, Maghsoodoo pushed his c-pawn, and I guess Carlsen will be probably putting his knight on e4 in the beautiful square in the middle of the board, trying to head towards d6 and also attacking the c3 pawn.
No! He makes a pawn sacrifice instead, a second one during the course of very few moves. Magnus Carlsen moving his pawn forward on a square that's being protected by three black pieces, despite white not having any control there whatsoever. The reasoning is that it's not about this b6 square at all. It's in fact about the b5 square, where the
overwhelming position now.
Maghsoodoo tries to take the pawn in the middle, but the white knights are coming in to attack that black queen. And look at these knights having a field day, making their way in towards the black king. Maghsoodoo is defenseless. Yes, he does get the trade of queens, but then I expect Magnus to start creating problems with his knights. Magnus doesn't even have to take back Black's queen in this moment. He can move his knight forward and start giving checks on the Black king. And Magnus taking his time now to consider that.
Yeah, I think every check that White was thinking about on c7 or d6, they all looked winning. To your point about Magnus's beautiful knights, he also had a game yesterday against Kabalia from the Karakan defense that I took a look at after our day ended, and he also had those beautiful knights.
Yeah, and now those knights might decide this game. Magnus having a devastating attack against the Black King, despite the queens being traded off. And Magnus now completing this attack, showcasing that you don't need queens to win chess games. Maghsoodoo now, the knight is being threatened, and there was too many pieces threatening it. Magnus has been able to win that piece, and in addition now, he's going to have a pawn one step away from becoming a new queen, and Magnus gets rid of the dangerous black pawn as well. Maghsoodoo resigns the game. A dominating display from Magnus Carlsen, defeating his opponent who were ahead of him in the standings. As the players discuss what went on in those complications, we're going to be moving over to Levon Avronian, the leader of this tournament, facing off against the second placed player, Bassem Amin. And Levon Avronian right now with one extra pawn in a rook endgame, he's looking very good to extend his lead.
Yeah, not only he has a better an extra pawn, but he also has a better pawn structure, a great rook on d5, and White just has so many weaknesses with his pawns that I think this win should not be very problematic for Black. He's actually threatening to go king c7, king b6, king b5, and position his king to attack the pawn on b4. Although he goes for a different plan, he just goes for the plan of trading those pawns and creating the passed b pawn. Looks pretty good too.
Yeah, that pawn is being pushed up the board, supported by the king as it moves forward. Avronian making sure that his rook protects the pawn on the right-hand side, and he's going to try to use these pawns on the queen side to win the game, and he's going to be successful with that. But Bassem Amin, there's nothing he can do. This pawn is just making its way forward, supported by the king, stepping up as well. Avronian, he's going to win this game, and considering that both of his main opponents, Maghsoodoo and Bassem Amin, are now losing, that means Avronian is going to have a huge lead in this tournament. That could have been maybe the championship game right there. I'm getting ahead of myself, of course, because there are another 8 rounds remaining, but a huge victory there for Avronian. And also those players discussing the game after the fact, as we are getting news in from the World Chess Organization about the ongoing problem of positive COVID cases among the participants. We see here that they confirmed there were 3 positive COVID cases, but everyone who played against these 3 players yesterday have been tested, and those tests have come back negative, and that means we can continue our event, where we're now watching Jan Krzysztof Duda having to deal with a rook and a queen pointing in towards the white king. There's no way to defend that position, and Duda, a former silver medalist in this Blitz championship, he's gonna lose this game against the promising youngster Marit. Sorry, you'll do the
Martirosyan.
Of Armenia.
Yes, that's right. I mean, if he blocks with rook f3, the simplest thing that Black can do is just trade the rooks and then win White's queen with rook a3, and that's the end of the game. We also have some big results in the women's side. Asobayeva, the leader, just like Aronian, she continues her winning ways against Vaishali of India. Alexandra Kostyanyuk's comeback to the top of the table has been stopped for now by Humpy Koneru. So those are the big results on the women's side.
And we'll get back to those results after a break. The World Blitz Championship, even though it has been delayed by an hour, it is now underway with the exciting final rounds. We're going to take a break and be back with the updated results and standings.
Lepaskan kekuatan dari kerajaan binatang. Dengan figur Transformer Kingdom terbaru, ubah dari mode binatang ke mode robot, dan kuasai pertempuran. Dua dunia beradu dengan figur Transformer Kingdom terbaru, masing-masing dijual terpisah.